Missouri Star is hosting a series of videos where they interview people about why they quilt, and I decided to follow along with their list of questions and tell you why I quilt. What was the first quilt you ever made? The first quilt I ever made was a Storm at Sea. What, doesn't everybody do that? The quilt pattern came from the very first issue of American Patchwork and Quilting. I thought it was the prettiest quilt on the magazine. I was a very new quilter, and I thought I liked this one the best in the magazine, and I decided to make it. I bought a rotary cutter and a cutting mat and a ruler and tried to follow the instructions as best as I could. There were templates in the pattern, and I did not know how to use a rotary cutter, and didn't really know how to use templates either, but I muddled my way through figuring out how to use templates and a rotary cutter at the same time. I followed the directions and I made the quilt. It turned out okay, and I did not know how to quilt it or how to bind it, but I muddled through it. I folded the front to the back in order to finish the edges. What is your favorite part about quilting? I'm not really sure. I guess I like pretty much all parts of quilting. My favorite part, I think, is starting a quilt, to come up with ideas about what I'm going to do, to choose the colors and the pattern, and dream about the possibilities of what the quilt might look like. I don't know what the quilt is going to look like. I can't really imagine it in my head, so it's a mystery to me. It's really exciting to me when the quilt is revealed and I can see how well I was able to execute on the design that I had in my head. What do I dislike about quilting? The repetition, I think. Making too many blocks. Sometimes making a large number of the same block over and over again can be relaxing and get you into a zen-like state, but I usually get frustrated with it if it's a complicated design. What made me get started in quilting? There was an anniversary when the state of Ohio was formed. There was a surge of quilting around the area, and I liked looking at the quilts, but I wasn't very interested in it. And then I bought this house. The person who owned this house before me was a quilter. She had quilts in some of the beds and on the walls, and I really liked those. And that was something that led me to feel that I could do something like that myself. And not very long after I bought the house, I started making my own quilts. Well, what was my earliest first memory of quilts? My mother made a quilt, but I never really thought of it as a quilt. It was just a blanket. It was a whole cloth quilt that was hand stitched, and it didn't occur to me that that was a quilt until way later when I had started making my own quilts, and I realized that she too had made quilts in the past. Have you ever used scraps for quilts? Yes, I use scraps for quilts all the time. In fact, I really love using scraps of fabric. I like to use them as small as I can get. When I was a beginning quilter, I bought fabric for a particular pattern, but as I really enjoyed looking at fabric, I would go to a nearest shop. I used to go to a fabric shop regularly, and what I would do is I would go window shopping, and I would allow myself to buy a fat quarter or a quarter yard. And that was my entertainment for the day, is just to get a quarter yard of fabric and spend an hour or two in the shop. So most of my collection of fabric is quarter yards of fabric. Once I started buying fabric online and there was a minimum of a yard or two, then my stash grew faster because then I had bigger pieces of fabric in my house. And what I would do with those quarter yards is I would put them together, combine them together to make a quilt. And then the scraps that were left over after that quilt was made, I would use them to make something else. Usually that something else got finished before that first thing. And then I would take the scraps that were left over making that second quilt and try to make something else with that. I try to use fabric in such a way that each of my quilts has some fabric from another quilt in it. I use the tiniest of pieces, even the little snippets of things that most people would throw away. I've fused them down to make other little teeny tiny scrap quilts. Do you have any ongoing quilts? Yes, I do. I have on my YouTube channel, Quilt in Color, in the month of December 2023, I held a 15 minutes to quilt challenge where I asked my viewers to join me in making quilts every single day. to spend at least 15 minutes to make progress on a quilt, and I found that I had at least 31 quilts that I could use for that challenge. I don't have very much more than the 31. I think I have probably maybe about 5 more than that. I haven't cleaned my sewing room in a while, so I might find more. But I think I have about 35, 36 quilts that are ongoing. But I have started a few since then. I really enjoy starting quilts. What else keeps you quilting? I like making quilts for other people, but mostly I like the process of making a quilt, everything from the designing to the actual production of the quilt, finishing it up. It all really is enjoyable to me. The finished product is not as important to me as the process. It doesn't really bother me that I have a lot of unfinished quilts. Do you have a stash? How big is it? What do you do with it? Yes, I do have a stash. As I said, I went to fabric shops for entertainment and have buy quarter yards of fabric. There's a fabric shop on my way to work. So every day, not every day, but once a week at least, I would go and buy a fat quarter or a quarter yard of fabric. When fabric is on sale, I like to buy bigger pieces then. So yes, I do have a stash. I really enjoy going through it and choosing the fabrics that I want to use for my quilts. I don't really buy fabric for any particular quilts anymore. I just go through my stash and see what I can do, what fabric I have in my stash that I can combine to make the quilt that I want. Do you use patterns or do you do your own thing? I do use some patterns, but for the most part I like to make my own quilts. It depends on if I find a particular pattern that I like, I will make that. But for the most part, I try to make my own thing. Even if I use patterns that are out there, I probably will try to put my own twist to it so that my quilt doesn't look exactly like everyone else's. Who do you teach quilting to? I have taught quilting to several people. I had my friend Rita, my mother and my sister and my daughter and my nephew. I taught them quilting or sewing or some parts of that. And we also had an exchange student that I taught some quilting to. How has my YouTube channel changed my quilting? The YouTube channel takes a little bit of time away from my quilting just because I had to spend the time editing the videos, so I don't have as much time to quilt. I also have some samples that I've made. For example, for my on point quilt, I cut some squares to show people how to make a quilt on point, and now that I've cut the squares, I'm going to go ahead and sew them up. So that's another quilt that I wouldn't have thought to make earlier. Another thing about the YouTube channel is it's making me more aware of my mistakes. So if I'm leaving the rotary blade open and I have a video that shows me, I keep looking at it as I'm editing the video. It's like, okay, I need to make sure that I close the rotary blade. Or if I'm cutting fabric and I haven't pressed it first, then I feel like, okay, I need to make sure that I press the fabric first. But I enjoy even watching the videos back once they're edited, because then it really shows why I enjoy quilting so much and how much fun I'm having while I'm quilting. And it just shows very clearly why it's so much enjoyable to me and how much enjoyment that I get out of quilting. Why do you quilt? I really enjoy all parts of quilting. I like the creativity of being able to just think of a design in my head and make a quilt that follows that design and see what it winds up looking like. At the end, it's a mystery to me, and it's enjoyable. There's a lot of similarities between my quilting and my genealogy hobbies. It's like putting a puzzle together. It's a mystery of what the quilt is going to wind up looking like. It's the process of doing it, the attention to detail that it requires. It's just a lot of fun overall. I just enjoy thinking of new ideas. I usually find about 3 patterns a day that I want to make, and obviously I can't make that many quilts. I'm not that quick. I'm actually very slow at making quilts when you think about it that way, but I really enjoy making them, and I enjoy the final product. I enjoy dreaming about the designs. I enjoy looking at quilts. I enjoy thinking about quilts and designing them, making them, quilting them, even binding them is good. and then just seeing the finished product and see what it looks like, and if I can gift it to somebody and I can see the joy in their face when they use their quilt, that's an extra bonus. I hope this video helped you learn a little bit about me. If you haven't already, please subscribe to this channel because I have a lot of quilting content on this channel, and I am going to continue to do more. And I have lots of ideas for more quilt videos. Thank you for watching. I appreciate all of your support, and I'll see you in the next video.